Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Gema View Virtual Industry Talk focused on business strategy and data and analytics. These weekly virtual talks are sponsored by the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance and the Colley Career Center. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to connect virtually with fellow Hoyas for this industry-specific discussion. I'm Stephanie Seitts, the Director of Alliances here at Georgetown, and I will be facilitating today's virtual talk. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. This event is being held via Zoom meeting, as you all can see, and is being recorded. Each participant has been muted on entry, and please try to keep yourself muted throughout the panel discussion so that we can cut down on any background noise. The panelists will take questions at the end of their discussion, so please feel free to send those via the chat function at the bottom, or at the end, we can offer for everyone to unmute themselves. If you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please also share those via your chat function, and you can privately message me those as well. Without further ado, I'm pleased to turn things over to Matt McMahon, a double Hoya and our Gema leader, who will be moderating today's conversation. Over to you, Matt.
Good morning from the West Coast, everyone. I'm in Los Angeles. I think we probably have a group across the country. I see a few familiar faces, so thank you for being here. We've got three fantastic panelists. I'll spend just a minute and a half. A shameless plug for Gema. I'm the co-chair of Gema Los Angeles. It's been a fantastic organization, very helpful to me as a two-time Hoya, SFS undergrad, went back for business school, and have really been involved with Gema from the start as it got going in 2003, 2004, while I was back getting my MBA on the Hilltops. So as much as we can support it, it's been great to do, and so I appreciate the participation. We have three great alums today to talk about data. I'll chime in a little bit here and there as my company also is pretty data centric. Data is now invading every part of life, sometimes to a greater or lesser degree, sometimes for better or for worse. But I'll have Tom, Abby, and Chip introduce themselves, speak a little bit about their time on the Hilltop, just where they came from, what school they were in, and then we'll start to get into the discussion a little bit more and see where it takes us. So as we move a little bit forward, I think if there's a chat function that's active, Stephanie, if there are questions, as we get a little deeper into it, please put them in the chat function, and I'll try and keep an eye on it, or Steph will try and keep an eye on it, and we're happy to take the questions from the group as we get a little further into the discussion. So without further ado, Chip, do you want to lead us off for an introduction?
Sure. So I'm Chip Borst. I was class of '07. I started off actually my freshman year. I was in the business school. I thought I was, going to go work on Wall Street. And then I realized I kind of hated math. So I switched to the college, and I was an English and a history major. And I grew up in LA. But my real name actually is not Chip. My real name is Mary Nell. But when I was 3, my imaginary friends were the cartoon chipmunks, Chip and Dale. And I didn't want to go to school. And so I pretended I was Chip. And that was just what I wanted to be called. But that speaks to, I've always had a very strong love of entertainment. My favorite things to do are to watch TV. So all I knew when I graduated college was that I wanted to work in entertainment, because if I'm going to spend 40 or 60 hours a week doing something, I want to love it. And so that's kind of how I literally fell into research. I applied for a bunch of assistant and entry-level jobs across, various companies. And I started as a research coordinator at CBS. And that's kind of how I discovered it. So want me to go in more detail, or is that a good start?
Chip, we'll jump back into individual roles in a sec, but that's a great start just to give an idea of kind of where you came from. And my next follow-up question honestly is going to be about kind of career path and what you do on a day-to-day basis. So we'll come right back to that.
Okay, great.
Abby, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Lavin. I graduated SFS in '06. I was a culture and politics major. I'm actually originally from Washington, D.C., and my parents had kind of worked in government my entire childhood. So I definitely went into my college experience kind of thinking that was the path I wanted to follow. I always had a really strong international focus in my studies, and I focused a lot on languages during undergrad. I studied Mandarin, Chinese, and I speak it fluently still. And so that was kind of the jumping off point for my career. Right after graduation, I moved to Shanghai, and I worked there in public relations and marketing for about 5 years. So that was kind of where I got my start.
Cool. And then Tom.
Sure. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is actually the first time I put on a button down in about 3 months, so I appreciate that opportunity, dusted it off. I graduated Georgetown in '05, and I was one of the many people who fell into the finance bucket. I started working for an investment bank across the river, a place called FBR. I did that for 6 years. I did that during the recession. I saw my company go from 1,000 employees to 200 employees. And then I decided I needed a change. And it was actually my wife, who was passionate about entertainment and sports, that convinced me that I should pursue a career in sports. At the time when I was in Georgetown, I didn't think that that was a path for me. I didn't even realize that that was even an opportunity. So it was really kind of her guidance and an idea that led me to go back. I got an MBA from USC here in Southern California, and I ended up working in analytics for AEG, which is the ownership group of the LA Kings and the LA Galaxy, and now I found myself as the VP of Business Operations for the LA Galaxy, and been doing that for about 7 years or so.
Fantastic, Tom. That's and Tom's wife Raquel is also my co-chair of Gema Los Angeles, and Ahoya herself as well too. So with deep family ties into the Hilltop as well. Let's do the same round again, but if we can make it now this time, focus on what you do on your current job, kind of where that is, and then I'll sort of lead some follow-up questions about it. But Chip, if you don't mind, just describing your current day-to-day, what you're up to, and kind of where you are in your career at this point.
Sure. So I am Director of Consumer Insights for ABC Entertainment. And I like to describe my job as I am, with a show throughout its life cycle. So we start with title testing. People write scripts, the development team picks it up. But, there can be various iterations of titles. If we have a show called Toast, people might think it's a reality show about cooking, but really it's a comedy of wedding toasts. So we kind of do research on that. That our next stage would be, testing a concept, seeing what elements are, interesting and engaging for folks and what elements maybe are not. So as they go, to produce a pilot, just to kind of be aware of the things that are already resonating with people. Then we do multiple pilot testing. So we do kind of usually about 3 rounds of testing where we, have oftentimes 20 pilots where we will stack them up and we will say, how do we make this the best pilot it can be? And then what's actually the best pilot to get on air at ABC. Then we moved kind of through to the marketing cycle. So we test, a lot of different promos. And we have, different target audiences for that. So, ABC typically has the NBA finals. So we might want to say what promo is going to work best for an NBA finals viewer. And that might look a lot different than, what a Bachelor viewer would respond to. As we kind of move through there, we start kind of awareness tracking. So are you aware of this new show? If so, are you interested? And we monitor that for the marketing team. And then when we get closer to launch, we usually test subsequent episodes of that pilot. So, 2 or 3 to see if it delivers on the promise of the pilot. And then we continue to do testing throughout the year, mid-season finales, to help people kind of understand what's working and what's not. So that's kind of the broad overview. We do a lot of content testing, and it's really fun. I like to say I get paid to watch TV for a living.
And Chip, before we move on to Abby and Tom, but when you mentioned testing, can you talk to us a little about that? Are these panel tests where you bring people in? Are these email tests? Are they, when you say testing, what does that actually mean?
Sure. So we do a variety of different testing. We have several vendors. Some are mobile, where you can download an app and people can, take it on their phone, and it's a panel that they've kind of opted into. We do online testing where we have, people being recruited from various, people sign up to, you get, take enough surveys, you get points, you get an Amazon gift card, that kind of thing. Or, one of the other things that is actually really fun for us to do are focus groups. Because, I've certainly done a lot of work on The Bachelor, and people can tell you what they like and don't like about it, but you get 12 women in a room who are really passionate about it, and you get a lot of interesting insights that add a lot of color. So that's always really fun for us too. So we do definitely kind of a wide variety and cross section.
Fantastic. Abby, could you describe what your current job is and kind of give us a little idea and insight into your typical days?
Yeah, absolutely. I just unmuted myself because I have a crying baby in the background. So I hope that that's not too disruptive. Apologies if so. My current day-to-day is changing a lot of diapers. But I will be going back, finishing up my maternity leave in a few weeks and going back to work at Amazon Studios, where I am a senior manager of audience insights. When Chip was describing her work, I was nodding along because I think there's a lot of overlap in the types of things we do. So for every title that Amazon puts out, whether it's a movie or an original series, or even sometimes an acquired series, like let's say there's something like recently the movie Knives Out, Amazon acquired the rights to be able to stream that on Amazon Prime. So whether it's original series and movies or acquired series and movies, we'll do a lot of testing to kind of figure out which elements of the storyline, the concepts, the characters really resonate with audiences that we can lean into in our marketing. And I think a big part of my role is also kind of helping to think about how different titles serve Amazon and Amazon Prime's business goals. So for example, is helping to think about, is the greatest opportunity for a given show to appeal to existing Amazon Prime customers and get them to kind of engage more heavily with the brand? Or is the greatest opportunity to maybe recruit new viewers and new members, or a certain type of new member, like are we going after young adults and trying to appeal to them, for example? So just kind of helping to think through some of those opportunities as well.
Fantastic. That's I've definitely been plugging in a little more during this lockdown period into my Amazon Prime Video subscription. So
that's what we like to hear.
Tom, if you could describe your day-to-day, I know at least because obviously we're friends and whatnot. I know your remit is pretty broad, but I think it'd be just be kind of curious to tell people how kind of what you handle, but then obviously kind of coming back to this data piece and the analytics piece.
Yeah, well, similar to Abby, I spend a lot of time changing diapers, and then in my free time, I manage business operations for the Galaxy. It's a pretty broad role. My start in sports was through data and analytics. I'm never going to claim that I'm a techie or anybody who knows how to code or do anything technical with data. My expertise is really analyzing the data and understanding, pulling out insights out of the data. I'm hopeful that everybody on this call saw that MLS is back, which is very exciting for us as a league and us as a team and a company. We are the first men's professional team sport to come back, and it's come with a significant amount of challenges that I tip my hat to our organization, also our league and our players to make that happen. So if you get a chance, ESPN, Fox, and Univision are broadcasting it, and it's fantastic. But on a day-to-day, I oversee a wide range of departments within the Galaxy, which includes HR, finance, analytics. I've overseen programming. I've overseen game presentation. Kind of anything that we do, I've overseen at some point in time. But really the core of what we do, while we want to win soccer matches, we also are a very entrepreneurial organization and league that is built on data insights and making wise decisions. Oftentimes when people think about analytics in sports, they think about Moneyball and they think about how are we using data to build a better team. That's certainly a component, and I applaud anybody who's going in that direction, but that's a very limited role within a sports team. There are many, many opportunities for individuals that are interested in business and sports to get analytics type positions on the business side as well. So there's the concept of, even on the business side, there are a number of things that are quantitative, but the concept of the unknown and the known fan, how are you tapping into a fan base that you know who those individuals are, but also how are you tapping into a fan base of those who might be interacting with you as a business, but you don't have their information. So we do a whole host of different things, but we are a small organization, the Galaxy, that reports into a much, much bigger company. So we do use a lot of outside resources in managing our warehouse, managing our data, but we have a small group of people that their sole focus is to make sure that our organization is making good decisions based on data. And not all of our decisions are based on data. However, we like to view ourselves in that department as a resource to the collective organization so that our departments are armed with the information they need to make the best decision. And on top of that, I really truly believe that an organization that is focused on data starting at the top, meaning the leadership group believes in data, is an effective way to get the most out of it, but also to grow the organization. So at our CEO, at our most corporate level, all the way down through the president of the galaxy to anybody else on the team recognizes the importance of data and how we apply it to our everyday decision making. So happy to proceed or answer questions or however you want to take it, Matt.
Tom, I can think of a couple things in the follow-up there, and I guess there's a question for all three. Does data run? Is that the driving factor in making decisions now? In my company, for instance, and I want to talk about this as a second follow-up, in terms of kind of specific roles that handle data and that translate data and whatnot too. In our company, we always talk about this blend between art and science. The idea that to a certain extent you want to go with your creative instincts, but back it up by data. I put it out to all three of you. To what role does data play? Is data the tipping point? Is data the driving factor? How important is that in the decision making? You hear things across the board from companies now testing things, and if it's an A/B test and one is half a percentage point higher, they're going to go with the one that's half a percentage point higher, even if it feels a little different. In a creative job with Chip and Abby, there's still some magic to kind of create a show and to create a marketing campaign. Where is that tipping point for you guys in the different organizations? I'd be curious.
Maybe I'll jump in. It's only a part. Data's only a part of the conversation, but it is definitely a part of it. There's the creative side of it, but we also have the community side of it. We are a team that's deep rooted in our community, and not every decision we make always comes with a quantitative analysis. Sometimes we just have to do what's right by our community. And also with a sports team, it isn't always driven by the bottom line. So we are not an organization. We want to do the best we can by having the best EBITDA or having the best financials that we could possibly have. But some of the decision making that we have to do is what's best, not only for the club, but also our community. So there's definitely it's a bit gray, but data definitely is a part of the overall conversation, just not the entire conversation.
Abby, I'd be curious. Oh, sorry, Chip. Chip, go for it. I'd be kind of curious how it goes. I mean, you're coming from a very traditional network. Abby's at a digital-first company. I'd be very curious how those kind of fall out.
Yeah, it's definitely a blend for us, and we've worked really hard. In research, it's like, like there are creators who have spent years writing their script and trying to get this made, and then the development team gets very invested and spend, a year of their life kind of working on this. So it's really difficult when something does not test well. And nobody wants to hear their baby is ugly, and these are their babies. And so our kind of, mission that we've really tried hard to establish is to be, as useful as possible and identify like the pain points that, are areas that they could look at, are, scenes that could potentially be trimmed to help pacing. But at the end of the day, I would say it definitely varies, because if it's a passion project, and there's a famous story, like The Office or Seinfeld had terrible pilot testing results. Sometimes it's helpful to know, like, if you've got something new and different and it doesn't test well, you might just, if you really believe in it, you're just going to have to teach people how to watch it, and you're going to have to do that. And that's information that can only be gleaned from testing and knowing kind of what you're up against. For kind of some things like marketing, I think data does play a big role. The marketing team really relies on us about, which ones are kind of getting the greatest conversion. So I think there, our testing plays a really large role. We'll test their key art and things like that. But it's certainly a blend. It's kind of, they want to have the creative eye. You can't, have cookie cutter things, because then everything would look the same. So we've just worked really hard to not be kind of considered the graders of like, hey, you got an A, you got a B. We definitely try and do our best to really be partners in terms of help them like if these aren't testing well, like what are the areas we think, you know, because we've tested the pilot. So I know that this scene was funny, like use this joke, maybe try that. So it's definitely a blend.
So Chip, so if I'm understanding correctly, you work both on the marketing side and I guess the development side. So your research and the group does service both, because that's an interesting kind of mix between. I mean, they're going after very different things, I guess.
Yes. So it's kind of like we work kind of on that cycle of like we're with the pilot, and once it gets to, you know, we've tested the pilot, and then the marketing team takes it and has to sell it. And what I can tell you is that it's a very different kind of task. You know, we are essentially paying people to watch 44 minutes of a show. And in 44 minutes, they're like, oh, I'm watching this and I'm here for this hour to take this survey. Hey, this show is really great. In 30 seconds, somebody who's watching the NBA finals is going to have a much different reaction to 30 seconds of content. So it's, you know, we always find that that's like one of the most interesting kind of challenges is like, how do we get the kind of best elements out of a 44-minute pilot into 30 seconds to convince people to watch?
It's tricky. It's definitely tricky.
No,
Abby, I'm curious, to what degree does data drive the day or drive the conversation within Amazon? Oh, Abby, you might be on mute again. I'm sorry.
I am. Sorry about that. I'm back. I think one area where my role is a little bit different from Chip's is she was saying she goes from development all the way through kind of the marketing cycle. And in my role, I really come in more at the marketing stage. So I'm less involved in kind of the upfront development. So in that way, kind of the tasks that we're faced with are a little bit distinct. But I would say that at least at Amazon, I guess everyone probably wouldn't be surprised to hear that data is really the foundation of every decision. And I think part of that is just company culture. Part of that is that we have such a wealth of data on our user base. But that being said, foundation doesn't mean that it dictates every decision, right? I think there's a huge need for people who can kind of help connect the dots and say, we have all of this information. It's really valuable. Here's the pieces we should be paying attention to, and here's the pieces that we can kind of ignore. Like to your point, if something is it's testing 0.5 percentage point better, maybe we don't look at that. So I really view my job as trying to connect those dots and helping. Like there are so many really smart kind of business analysts and engineers at Amazon, and they have so much information, but translating it into insights and helping our marketing teams understand what's going to be most valuable is really where I come in, is kind of helping people know which data points to focus in on.
Fantastic. And Abby, that's where I wanted to drive with kind of a second point, even leaving from Tom's mention. In our company, at least to give you an example, we have data scientists who are PhD in math, and then we have business analysts, and then we have marketing analysts. I'd be curious if you guys could talk a little about the role, particularly with an eye to the folks on the panel who are going to head out into the workforce. And we're coming from a school that, God love Georgetown, and we all do, isn't necessarily the heaviest quant school in the world, right? But data is a piece of every sort of business now. How do you look for that? I mean, how do you look for, what are the different kind of roles that happen there if you're, again, not the math PhD? I think all four of us on the call, particularly you three who are dealing with the data on a more day-to-day basis, don't necessarily have traditional data-centric kind of backgrounds. If you could speak to those roles and kind of how different people can have different roles with different responsibilities within that, that'd be super helpful. Maybe Tom, I'll hand it back to you and we'll kind of keep going in the rotation a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So for our data and analytics team, we sit siloed from the rest of the organization. It does not live within our marketing department. It does not live within, for us, ticketing is a pretty quantifiable department for us. So it sits independently for us. We have, like I said, we have a corporate team that sits downtown that spends a lot of time on building our warehouse and managing the feeds of our data from our ticketing platform, from our app, from the league, and they feed all that information into the.
When you say warehouse, sorry to interrupt, but warehouse is your data warehouse. So this is not physical warehouse. This is
yeah. Well, it's not a physical warehouse. No, it might. Yeah, it's our data. It's the data warehouse. So they manage it from the day to day, and I wish I could tell you exactly what it takes to run a warehouse. So please, Matt, don't ask me that. I don't have a dang clue of what it takes to run a data warehouse. Maybe more of a physical warehouse. So they manage that for us. And really what my team is responsible for is taking that data that is being built by our warehouse, by our corporate team, and applying it to our everyday functions. We don't have probably the skill sets that Abby and Chip and some of their teams have within our organization. We love to build that at some point. We don't have that right now. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we rely on third parties and other vendors to provide us with the reporting tools that we need to make our decisions. So they provide us with dashboards and various things where we can hand these dashboards to our various department heads so they can help make those decisions. There's significant opportunity for anybody on this call or anybody who's interested in data to get into a data function and really make a significant impact within the organization from to the highest level, the most senior level within the organization. I think there's a lot of running room because even though data is becoming much more of a traditional role within an organization, it's still very new within any organization. And it's usually those individuals that are younger, that are just graduating school, that have these insights. And a lot of the individuals that are potentially more senior or older within the organization just never had the opportunity early on to learn those skills. So you get in front of some pretty significant people early on to be able to give feedback, give direction, provide your knowledge. So I don't think I directly answered your question, but hopefully I provided something that was useful.
Yeah, I think as we go, and Chip, we'll move over to you. And we can follow up with this a little bit. I'd be kind of curious again, more specific on kind of roles that people can target as they move into move into graduation and move into careers if they find the subject matter interesting. But Chip, to move to you, you said you kind of fell into research by a little bit. I'd be curious again how those roles break down. I mean, do you guys have the hardcore quants who are really breaking it out and then they translate it to you and then it kind of goes to somebody else? How do those roles, what are those roles and how do they sort of fall and what backgrounds do people have that they bring to it? I'd be curious.
Sure. So I think it varies across obviously all the different kind of entertainment networks. For kind of ABC specifically, all of research sits under kind of my boss, including our advanced analytics team. And those are the kind of more traditional, like really talented people who are incredibly smart and deal with massive amounts of data and are doing things like trying to figure out if you were exposed to a 5-second promo a month ago, like, is it worth it? Like, is that time worth it? And is that one exposure kind of, does it buy you kind of people actually showing up? So they're doing like very complicated things that I don't understand. Then we have kind of my team, which is the kind of primary research. So we are doing kind of what I talked about. We're doing research on the shows themselves. So we obviously, use data based on all of our kind of survey work. But also, the qual insights as well. So those focus groups, we would never say like, do this because a group of 12 people told us to, but that is data in and of itself. And it's turning those data points from our surveys into a story. Then we have essentially our ratings team. So those are the people who are, monitoring like how our shows performed, after 1 day, after 3, after 35, who are, getting exposed to, maybe some data from Hulu if they're, if we're sharing that and kind of saying like, well, you might not be performing, fantastic in your first week, but actually people do catch up on your show, a few weeks later. And so you are a strong performer. So, we have a lot of folks on that team who have, very kind of standard, any sort of regular degree. So that's not necessarily something you need any sort of advanced analytics experience with, because it's, a lot of kind of basic math and it gets more advanced as you grow, but that's something you kind of learn on the job. So those are kind of the main roles that we have at ABC.
That makes sense. Abby, does that dovetail a little bit with Amazon? I mean, it sounds like, again, that there's engineers who kind of create the data warehouses, create the databases, and then almost translators as it goes forward into the various functions, whether that's development or marketing or something along those lines. And that's kind of how we run our business too, the data scientists and then kind of the analysts, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, one quick thing I just want to say to everyone on the call, that might be valuable. I don't know, just as you thinking about kind of being earlier in your careers or starting your careers, is when I was in undergrad, I did not know. I had no inclination that I had an interest in research or data science. It wasn't until I was actually a few years into my career that I kind of started to uncover my interest and my passion for that work and kind of lean that way and explore those opportunities. So the one thing I want to impart is like, don't be intimidated. Don't think that you need to come out of undergrad with some fancy credentials or like, you know, be going for your PhD in mathematics in order to build a career in this field. And in terms of specific kind of roles to look for, I would say like if you're seeing things like earlier in your career, like opportunities like an insights analyst or associate, research associate, you know, those are kind of things to aim for. And one other thing that might be useful, I think there's a tremendous need for people who are social media savvy, who like, even if you're going after a role like a community manager, that's a great place to get your foot in the door in terms of data and analytics, because companies really need social media savvy people who are usually younger people who can kind of help them not only create content for social media, but also start to get comfortable with the back end of understanding, you know, which posts performed better in terms of engagement and why. So that can be a really good like starting point in your career to kind of get your feet wet with some data science and analytics. And then I know that was a little bit of a tangent, but to answer the other question, Amazon is kind of set up in that way where there are kind of engineers and business analysts, and they're kind of doing like the hardcore number crunching. I mean, these are definitely people who have PhDs in mathematics and economics and things like that, that like goes way over my head. And, you know, they're running regression analyses and kind of like Chip was saying, they understand like the incremental value of like for every minute of an Amazon show that we can get someone to watch, like this is the dollar value to our business. And they're doing these incredibly complex calculations, which is all very valuable work. And then where my team comes in, the audience insights team, is more about translating those data points into actionable insights for marketing. And again, with Amazon Studios, there is kind of a silo between those of us who are doing that work for marketing versus those of us who are doing that work earlier in the process for development. We do communicate with each other and share information, but they're kind of two separate teams.
Cool. Thank you, Abby. Just for the group, I have a few more questions for sure, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free, add them to the chat and I can kind of draw them out from there and ask our panelists. So please feel free to fire away. Definitely, we're now, you know, a little bit into it. We have a few more minutes certainly, but definitely, obviously, we'd be happy to make this as interactive as possible. While folks are doing that, I'll put it out to the group again too. Who do you think does, I guess, has the best data practice of your peer set companies? Who translates as the best? Who do you look at and go, God, I want to kind of get to where they are with it? I mean, Abby, maybe we'll start again with you. I mean, Amazon, in my mind, does that really, really well, obviously, both on the consumer kind of store side of the business. And Abby, as best I can tell, does it really well on the creative video side of the business too. But who do you think does it really well out in your space?
I think so. First of all, like I actually went from working in a more traditional kind of cable network space to, I made the move over to Amazon just earlier this year. So for me, that was really exciting because I was going, already like leveling up, I think, just in terms of moving to a more data-centric organization compared to where I was previously. That being said, like I think that what Amazon Prime and Amazon Studios is really good at doing is understanding who watches a particular show or a particular movie and kind of doing the research to uncover why. But when I look, for example, at one of our competitors, like in Netflix, I think that Netflix is really good at kind of going a step beyond that and not just understanding who watches a particular show, but like why people have a relationship with Netflix the whole brand, not just like one movie or one show, why people are addicted to the experience of logging into Netflix and browsing, which is frankly something that I don't think Amazon has really cracked yet. So I think that I kind of look to Netflix as a good example of like a holistic brand experience, not just an individual show experience, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Chip, for you, having been at CBS, having been at Ipsos, having been now at ABC, are there other networks you see in a traditional sense? Do you guys mark yourself against a Netflix or an Amazon who are a little bit of a different beast? Who out there is doing it and you're saying, that's where I want to go?
I mean, Netflix is kind of like the gold standard because they have all that information and they can go one-to-one in terms of the research. And that's, a challenge that I don't think broadcast can ever really overcome. I will say, I think we do, based on my time at CBS, which was several years ago now, the one other piece, and Abby did touch on it, we do have, a social media kind of manager who is monitoring like how the digital marketing team does. That is part of our group. One other thing that our group has that I think is a little bit unique, I certainly CBS didn't have it, but part of our team is also doing, brand and culture work. And it's a little bit harder for ABC to have a brand compared to a Netflix. It's just kind of inherently a little bit more of a challenge. But we've done a lot of really interesting kind of like cultural studies. We kind of consider it, like upper funnel for development. So we've done like a deep dive on, moms, and we've done, a deep dive into microculturalism, which is like really broad and interesting work, and is not kind of directly about, like research on this one show. It's kind of, hopefully like a thought starter as, creators are creating content. So I'd like to think that ABC does that pretty well, and that's, kind of special and something interesting that we can, provide for all of our clients.
Cool. Tom, I'll pass this over to you. Then we have a few questions coming in the chat, but are there teams you guys benchmark yourself? Are there other sort of sports organizations and leagues? Again, who does it really well out there?
Yeah, really the leagues that do it the best are probably Major League Baseball and the NBA. You've seen a lot of movies and concepts and different articles, I'm sure, about what these teams in these leagues are doing. MLS does a fairly good job. I wouldn't say that we're at the top of the rankings for how we apply analytics, but keep in mind a lot of what is important for sports team is the capabilities of your stadium. So when you see a lot of these stadiums coming online, just down the street from me is a $5 billion stadium that's about to be opening that is going to be state-of-the-art everything, and not even in the same hemisphere as any stadium that's ever been built before. You hear about AT&T Stadium in Dallas and how impressive that was. This is 2 times the cost of what that cost. And they're going to be so powerful in how they're aggregating data and applying data, how they're giving their fans access to the stadium through ticketing. And many people don't realize how complicated ticketing is, but ticketing is a highly complicated, a very quantifiable piece of a sports business organization. So there are teams that are doing some fantastic things. I think that, like I said, Inglewood and SoFi Stadium are going to do fantastic things. I think some of our counterparts at LAFC, who have a brand new stadium in Banc of California, are doing some impressive things. But you're also hearing about the Sacramento Kings do a lot, the Dodgers do a lot, and we really would like to strive to be doing what they're doing, but also what Abby and Chip are saying, what the studios are doing. There are a lot of things that they're doing that would translate into our business, and I really envy the things that those studios are doing, and would love to see our department and our organization get there, but we're not at the same level as those groups are just yet. But like I said, a lot of what we do is really dependent on how tech savvy your stadium is, and really how new your stadium is. Our stadium happens to be about 15 years old. We were the second soccer specific stadium built in the United States behind the Columbus Crew. We spent about $200 million to build our stadium. I think it was about 2003. And I still see it as an iconic venue in soccer in America, but we don't have Wi-Fi. for example. We have DAS and we have the ability to get accelerated service to our fans, but we don't have Wi-Fi at the minimum. And all that trickles into points of sale, and how are you giving your fans access to the parking lots, and how are you transacting at the different concession stands. And you think we have a $200 million stadium, and down the street is a $5 billion stadium going in. So there is definitely groups that we envy, and a lot of it's just dependent on where you play.
Cool. We've got a ton of really good questions in the chat, so I'll start to fire through, and if I don't get to everybody's questions, I apologize. We'll do a quick hit one real quick, just sort of speed round for Abby, Chip, and Tom. What are the most used tools or in-demand skills for this position? Do you need to be incredible in Excel, pivot tables, Tableau, Power BI? Are there certain programs which you need to be conversant in order to kind of do this? And are those something you need to come to a job with, or can you learn as you go? Chip, maybe to start.
I can start. Excel is definitely something that is needed, and the better you can be at it, the better. Tableau is something new on our team. I personally don't know how to use it, but we're trying to get a training so that my team and I can start to learn. So we don't have a use case for it, but it was something when I was interviewing people, for the last open job I had, I was asking people if they were experienced, just because those skills are always good to have.
Cool. Abby?
Excel, 100%. The more well-versed you are in Excel and kind of ways to use it efficiently and quickly, including pivot tables, the better. I'm a big fan of, I feel like in my career, I've learned everything as I go. So, don't be intimidated. You can absolutely take a course online, take a free course, learn by doing. I'm all about that, learning as you go. And I think that applies to things like Tableau and other data visualization tools as well. We use Tableau at Amazon. I think if you are conversant or have experience in any social analytics tools, there are a ton of them out there, and I don't feel like there's one that beats another in terms of what employers might be looking for. But I will say at Amazon, we use a lot of a tool called Listen First, which kind of helps explore the social presences of different brands, be it your own brand that you're working on or competitor brands, and kind of what content they're publishing and how it's performing. And we also use a tool called YouGov, which has a lot of different use cases, both from kind of being able to, it's survey data on different subsets of the population, so you can kind of get a basic understanding of, you can kind of slice and dice any way you want. What percentage of women 18 to 34 are watching Hamilton on Disney Plus? You can kind of build out your own custom queries like that. So YouGov is another really good one that we tap into a lot.
Fantastic. Tom, anything comes to mind? Excel's a big one. Pivot tables or something I had to learn very much mid-career and still kind of confused me. But
yeah, I'll be quick. Excel. You're never going, when I was in college, we never had a traditional class, and even in my business school, we never had a traditional class in how you do Excel. I agree, you just have to do it. You could Google anything on how to do Excel. What I'd recommend and how I learned was I took someone else's model and I rebuilt it. Index functions, embedded match functions, pivot tables. I would encourage every single person, be the best person at Excel.
Yeah.
Try to be the best you can possibly be, because it is not that challenging to learn Excel, and you'd be amazed at how far advanced you would get by being very good at it.
Yeah, agreed. A couple questions. These are a little more for Abby and for Chip. One here, and I'll try and represent it correctly. When you do quantitative analysis of audiences, how do you ensure that you're allowing room for innovation in the media that you're analyzing, i.e., do you have practices in place to make sure that you're kind of giving new and fresh perspectives and not feeding the content that has been successful in the past, that you're not essentially that the biases don't sort of lurk in there? And as we're having kind of broader questions, obviously in this country, and discussions about inclusion and bringing everybody into the tent and the conversation, how do you make sure that the data doesn't become sort of self-perpetuating to point you in the same direction over and over again?
I think I can jump in really quickly. I think it's such a great question. And I think it's something that we want to constantly be reevaluating and getting better at. there's a couple things that come to mind just off the top of my head. So, because I do think there is a tendency in research in general to kind of have that confirmation bias or that feedback loop. So with Amazon, I think historically, we really leaned into, when we were testing content, we really leaned into a pre-existing panel of Prime members where we were tapping people who already watched a lot of Prime content and saying, hey, do you want to watch this pilot and tell us what you think about it? And over time, we realized like, yeah, for some things that's valuable. For some things that might be holding us back from trying to appeal to new audiences, beyond the people who are already kind of engaged with our content. So we increasingly kind of prioritize going outside the walls of Amazon and talking to different cohorts of people and understanding what appeals to them. And then the thing I'll say to just add on to that is Chip mentioned a little bit like the qualitative versus quantitative research capacities. And I think that they both have their value, but there's certain things that you can get from qual that would be harder to get from quant. So we do a lot of quantitative research. We're kind of showing people a piece of content and getting their response to it. But I think qualitative, like focus groups or more conversational settings, those are really good for getting at questions you maybe didn't even know that you had, and maybe turning up ideas for new types of entertainment and shows, aside from you just kind of spoon feeding people what you think they want. And then it's like that thing, like Henry Ford, like if you ask people, like, what did he say? You know what I'm talking about? The horse, like if you ask people if they wanted like a faster car, they would just say they wanted like a horse or something, meaning like you sometimes don't even know the questions that you want to be asking. And so I think having more of a dialogue with people rather than like a structured quantitative survey can turn up some more unexpected results.
Yeah.
For you guys, how do you sort of prevent confirmation bias or that kind of that feedback loop? How do you break through a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's something, and especially now with everything that's going on, we've done kind of like, we went through all of our primary vendors, especially for pilot season, and we're like, how are we matching up? Do we, and for our kind of final cut, which is where we're talking to 400 people who watched the pilot, like we have matched to census. So in that way, like, we were kind of already taking that into account. But we also have traditionally done, if we have a show with, predominantly African-American cast or a Hispanic cast, and, our creators are saying, this is the group that we want to be really reaching here. And we've done, augments where we'll talk, to 100 and, and really dive into kind of more of the nuance there. It's also one of those things where it's, sometimes on like the development team, with marketing, we tend to know, like, they will say like, this is the audience we're going after. So we're kind of more able to like target that group, and that's who we want to really be hearing from. With development, it's kind of on their purview about like, who do they want to be making sure that they're representing authentically and kind of getting that feedback from. So we partner with them in that way to make sure we're reaching the right people and hearing the right, responses.
Got it. Another question for Chip and for Abby specifically, and then we'll keep looking at a few more. We are coming up on an hour here, so I apologize we're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. But for Chip and for Abby, a question specifically about talent. It sounds like one of the Gema programs for the summer is looking at casting specifically. How much does talent weigh into, or when you cast somebody and you have talent attached to something, whether that's showrunner, but certainly kind of, I guess, consumer facing, the actors, et cetera, how much does that factor in? I mean, do you look at that? Does that sort of sway the day? Does that move the data significantly? How does that come through?
It depends totally. And that's one of those things where, right now we are not able to be in production. And so I am literally testing promos right now. That really the only thing they have, it's 15 seconds and it's from David E. Kelley, the creator of Big Little Lies. And like, so it's all on him to kind of get interest at this point. So it totally depends. We always evaluate talent. That's also one of those things of, oh, well, how much do you like this actor? And you might get results that seem really high. And sometimes that's a bias of people in surveys just, telling you what you want to hear, or, saying they're aware of this actor when they're really not. But that's when things like open ends are really valuable. Like, why did you like this show? Oh, it stars this actor. And like, you can see when people have, real equity. because there'll be a main thing that people are responding to. And then that's something we share with marketing of like, this person is going to do a lot of heavy lifting for you. Like they're so well liked that people will sample a show just for them. So that is definitely something that always comes into play when we're looking at content.
Makes sense. Abby, for you, how does talent play into it in a certain way, or does that overweight things, or how do you guys look at it?
I mean, yeah, very much so. It does play in. One thing I really like about Amazon and kind of their approach to developing content and marketing content is that it's not really, in my experience, it's not really a situation where a show is greenlit and executives decide, oh, this is our top priority for the year. We're going to put $10 million behind marketing it, no matter what, and kind of dig their heels in and move forward. It's actually quite the opposite. So it's really iterative. So they might greenlight a show, and then a few months later, a big name will be cast. And so they'll kind of reevaluate and say, oh, like this is this has more potential than we thought. Maybe we should invest more in developing it or invest more in marketing it. Or the opposite can happen. Talent can back out, or a name can become attached, but it's like not quite the size of name that we were expecting. And so we might still promote the show, but maybe not at the level that we were going to. So talent decisions and talent information we're always kind of adjusting as we go, and how we think about the potential of a show based on which names are involved. I use in the past, I've used a lot, and in my current role, I use a little bit, a source called ePoll, which is just kind of a good source. It's subscription only. They might have some free content on their website, but it's a really good source to get kind of a baseline of different levels of, they have like basically every celebrity or public figure you can think of, and you can kind of see what percentage of people of the general of certain demographics are aware of this person, or what people have a positive perception of this person, or what different character traits or attributes are associated with this person. So that's kind of often a place I turn to if I'm just looking to understand like recognizability or appeal of a specific cast member, or even a specific showrunner.
Got it. Thank you. It is true. I mean, when I was at 20th Century Fox for a long time, and we would build full campaigns around the talent for sure. We would do it without any data whatsoever. It was much more anecdotal, but it was, obviously you would put those people first and foremost. So it's, I'm sure there's a bit of a balance now to understand, are they really impactful, or is it just kind of what you're going with? Tom, a question for you, a little specific, but I'm actually personally curious of all too. So I'll put this out to you. With states increasingly allowing sports gambling, I guess the question is, and also that on-site potentially at stadiums, one, just where MLS comes down on it, but staying with the data idea, would you ever gain access to this data, and how would you be able to utilize it without any kind of conflict of interest or muddying the waters in any sort of way? Do you guys have a point of view on that, or has that matured enough to take a look at?
Yeah, I think it's still premature, but we do have thoughts on it. The way that we monetize, at least from the outside, the way that we monetize gambling, it's not specifically the gambling that we're going to monetize. So if we set up kiosks within our stadium and people can place bets, that's not real where the money comes from, because the winnings and the money goes to the states and to the winners of the gambling. Where we monetize gambling is through sponsorship. So just like you see on the Premier League and other leagues, we could put a betting firm on our kit, on our jersey, and monetize it that way. But it's really about more engagement. If we are able to promote betting, perhaps more people will watch our matches on television. So, and that's really where the power is for us. I'm unsure where the data would come from specifically, but I'm sure there are means in which we could acquire data. But it's really about how are people engaging with our brand. And I think everyone saw through fantasy football how fans really took the fantasy football and it's really built up the NFL, or continued to build the NFL to a higher level. So we're hopeful that we can be progressive as a league, and we could do similar things through betting when the time is right. But you're seeing a lot of professional sports leagues now trying to get their footing in Las Vegas. You see it with the Raiders opening up in a few months. You saw it with the NHL going there. There is a Division II soccer team that plays there. called the Las Vegas Lights out of the USL Championship Division. But many teams are trying to find out how they get their footing in Vegas. But I think to start, the NHL did a very good job with setting the tone on what to expect by having a team in a city like that. So premature still, but we're excited for the opportunities.
All righty, last question. I see Stephanie back here on the camera, so we'll try and squeeze in one more to Chip, Abby, and Tom. And this feels like a good one to end on too. In your experience, has there ever been an instance where, I guess, data got it wrong and human emotion and kind of, again, the art side was something that really sort of held the day? Again, Chip, you'd use the examples of Seinfeld tested really poorly, but in your own personal experience, has there been something where somebody's had to really fight one way or the other to you kind of figure out the correct balance?
So one show that comes to mind was it was my first year at ABC, and we had a musical comedy called Gallivant. I'm not sure if anyone has seen it, but it did not have good testing results. But the president of the network and the development people were like, well, do you have musical comedy norms? Kind of like it was something very new and different. And they were very passionate about it. And so they went for it, and marketing, had a little bit of a tough time at first trying to find a promo that would work, but they finally got one, they managed to get a ton of great guest stars. So they did a big compilation of like a musical comedy extravaganza. I mean, I literally remember it because it was 6 years ago, but it was like, we did so much testing and they finally found something, and they managed to kind of market it in the right way and schedule it in the right way so that, it wasn't like a super successful show, but it actually had like a much stronger launch than anyone had anticipated, and it was scheduled in the right way. So it was kind of like all the things came together, and that was an instance in which, the early pilot testing data would have said, if you just listened to data, you would have said no.
Abby, anything that jumps out where, again, the data might have been a little off and the human factor still had to kind of see through it in a way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's like quite a few examples that come to mind, because I think when you're testing a piece of content, it's an artificial environment where you're putting people in the room and serving something to them and asking for their take. And people might tell you like, oh, like not bad, but it's a big leap from there to say, am I actually going to go seek this out, right? And how is it? And there's a lot of other factors such as scheduling, like Chip mentioned, what's on at the same time or in the same season that's kind of competing with it and taking people's attention. So there's a ton of examples. Before I worked at Amazon, I worked for E Entertainment, keeping up with the Kardashians and all that fun So I worked a lot on reality TV and a lot on Kardashian stuff. And like, I think there was, just because Keeping Up with the Kardashians is such a successful show, there was kind of this notion that like we can spin this off until the cows come home. And they're like, for example, last summer, yeah, I think so. Last fall, E premiered a show called Flip It Like Disick, which was Scott Disick from Keeping Up with the Kardashians flipping houses. And you think about like those ingredients, it's like, oh, Keeping Up with the Kardashians meets like a home renovation show. Like people love those two things. It should work. And it did test really well. But that didn't translate into ratings, I think, for a number of reasons. I think like scheduling was part of it. So like it didn't have a lead in, the show airing before it, that was really compatible, that was bringing a complementary audience into the show. And I also think brand fit is a part of it too. People want to watch a home renovation show on HGTV, but people they're not accustomed to looking for a home renovation show on E. So people might have, in a focus group setting, might have seen it and liked it, but it didn't really translate into ratings for the network.
I will say, Abby, I did miss Flip It with Disick. That didn't quite hit past my radar, but
well, you missed out, and I'm sure you can still catch it on VOD.
That's probably true. Tom, anything that jumps out where, again, the data, you almost had to say no, we'd a higher rated striker than Chicharito, but we want Chicharito anyway, or something more on the business side? Anything that kind of jumps out as a great example of how you guys still look at it?
That's a good question.
Take a pause.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't maybe have a specific example like Chip or Abby did, and certainly not like Flip It Like Disick. Yeah, a lot of the decisions that we make listen, we had we had one of the biggest superstars in the world on our team last year, a guy named Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He is not on the same level as any other player in the world, with the exception of a handful of people. And you're making decisions and you're acquiring talent like him, but they don't always translate to the bottom line on the business side. Sometimes you're trying to build a brand and you're trying to build a sense of community within the city, that you're making these decisions because you also want to win soccer games that don't always translate to something that is right in front of your face or something that's attainable. So we make the decisions that, you know, we are hopeful down the road, 5, 10, 20 years, we'll continue to build up our sport in our country than maybe it is now. So it might not be something we see right off the bat.
Fair enough. Makes sense. It's as just a fan of the Galaxy, I thoroughly enjoyed having Zlatan there. That was an amazing couple of years. All for it. I'm a completely into Zlatan, little man crush. But with that, on that note, I guess it's 12:01, so we've kind of reached the top of the hour here on the West Coast, and then top of the hour across the board. So I just want to say thank you to Tom, to Chip, to Abby. Really appreciate it. There were a bunch more questions, so I'll hand the keys and the reins back over to Stephanie to see how we might be able to follow up on some of that, and also to talk about the next couple panels coming from Gema this summer. So Stephanie, take it away.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining. We hope you enjoyed our first Gema View Industry Talk this week. And as Matt mentioned, this is a weekly series happening on Thursdays every single week until August 13th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm having a real hard time with that in my brain. Next week's talk is around the legal aspects of entertainment and media, various companies. Tom's wife will actually be on that panel, Raquel, who is Matt's co-chair for Gema LA. So that will be a really awesome one. And I think Jackie has been sharing in her communication the week by week discussions for each industry, and we'll send a follow-up email after this today that outlines those as well, just so you guys have them in your inbox, and then the links to register if you haven't already. But thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.